Hi, I'm Arlene McIntyre, Creative Director at Ventura Design, and you're listening to Shut the Front Door, a light-hearted podcast that will bring you through the front door and into the homes of influential and interesting people. Home for me is one of the most important things in my life. My career has fortunately given me the opportunity to work closely with people and to help them create a home they will cherish forever. Dermot Bannon is the leading voice in modern Irish architecture design. He has hosted the RTE Room to Improve TV series for the last 12 seasons and has helped transform the homes and lives of hundreds of clients. Dermot recently shared the journey of the creation of his new home in Drumcondra. It was a delight to watch as Dermot was both the client and the architect at the same time. The end result, as we all know, was astounding. Married to Louise and father to Sarah, James and Tom, we'd love to welcome Dermot to Shut the Front Door. Hello, Dermot.
Hi, Arlene. How are you?
I am good. How is life in lockdown?
It's okay. It's fine. I'm busy. I'm working away. I suppose the hardest part is kids at home and watching them. They're kind of slowly descending into kind of laziness a little bit, but it's just not laziness is the wrong word. They need their sports, they need their friends, they need just communication with other kids and playing and all of that. And I think a huge amount has been taken away from them. And they're fine, they're coping, but they're very, it's difficult when you're at home and think, you always feel guilty as if you should be doing more for them, but you can't because you still have to do a day job. And
of course.
So it's okay. I'm missing kind of traveling around the country. I'm missing meeting people. I'm missing the office. I'm missing face-to-face chats. I'm not missing the kind of I remember I got into a blind panic when all the shops shut down and all that, and said, what if we need this? Actually, I've kind of reversed that a little bit. It's amazing how you can manage with kind of whatever is on your doorstep and whatever is there. All the kind of consuming and all that, I don't really miss. It's the friends, the people, I miss the cups of coffee, but not for the coffee because you can make it home. I miss it for just saying hello to the person in the coffee.
Yeah, the contact.
And human contact. And I miss kind of restaurants, not again because of the food. I just miss kind of meeting friends, and I miss kind of, and actually I didn't realize how much I liked my work colleagues and how much I enjoyed their company and how much, like when you're very, very busy, and I suppose I've been incredibly busy for the last 12 years running a practice and then doing Room to Improve and then traveling with incredible homes, and they kind of all run one into the other. I think in a way, and then with family, my friends have always taken a bit of a backseat because I just don't have time to go out and socialize, or if I'm going out, you're kind of worried about the next morning, about getting up for football match and all of that. So I've actually become great friends with my work colleagues because they're the people that you spend 8 or 9 hours a day with, and you have the crack with, and they start to get to know you as well as all your friends, and especially the crew that I travel with. And we might go to, we just came back from Canada before lockdown, and it's you go out for dinner with them every evening. You're spending 2 or 3 hours. You're on a bus with them all day. You're kind of in airports for 4 hours waiting for a connecting flight. These guys become your friends, and they get to know you very well, and you get to know them well. And that's kind of that easy, relaxed friendship that you have with people. And a lot of that was through my work colleagues, which I never realized because I always thought, I'd love a bit of time off work. You get the time off work, and actually it's the people that I miss.
Yeah, that's so true. And just that, interaction, social interaction. I popped into our showroom yesterday just to pick up some parcels and posts, and there was a few of the team upstairs, and it was just really nice, even from a distance, to just look at somebody and have a conversation and not just see them through a box on a screen.
Or waiting for them to finish so that the microphone works on their laptop. And
exactly.
kind of almost feel like saying Roger at the end of everything that you say.
Honestly, it's so
the mic turns off and theirs goes on.
And how do you think we're going to work our way through this in terms of the construction, and from the construction point of view?
I think, I suppose the construction is lifting on Monday. The sites are opening on Monday. I think, look, we can build houses, we can make things, and we can social distance. Like in a lot of a lot of the trades on a building site tend to work by themselves. So you'll have one plumber in a house, and they might work from room to room, or two plumbers. But same with joiners, the same with painters, decorators, and most people tend to work in ones or twos, and they can generally socially distance. I think just what's going to happen is you can't have a two or three trades on site at the one time, and that you would normally have. So it'll elongate the construction process until we find a rhythm. So I think, and I think it's the stress of all of this now is the not knowing. So we're kind of guessing what it's going to be like. I think we'll know an awful lot more in a month's time, and 2 months' time will be different again as we kind of slowly get used to it. But I think things are opening up on Monday, and nobody really knows how it's going to be or what it's going to be like. And I think and that's what COVID has kind of brought to everybody, isn't it? The first couple of weeks were a bit of a novelty, and we were all kind of in this together, and there was there was a real kind of pulling together of communities and the country. And I think once we've kind of got to this stage, I think people are a little bit scared of okay, I kind of miss some of the old stuff. Are we ever going to see that again? Am I ever going to be able to meet my friends? Am I ever going to be able, things like, you start to get jealous of TV programs where you see people hanging out together. You're thinking,
it's true.
I think there was a novelty at the beginning where you think, no, we can do this for a few weeks. But I think when it goes on and it's a couple of months, and they're telling you that you might have to wear a face mask for the next year, that's kind of serious stuff. And I think they're going to be the big changes. But construction wise, look, it'll get back to some kind of a normal next week, but nobody really knows until we're about a month or two into it.
Yeah, that's true. I was speaking to a project manager. We're working on a project in the UK, and they've been back on site already before Ireland. And he said, they're getting on with it. It's okay. They're just all practicing the social distancing, and it's working.
It is. Yeah, I suppose the things that I know we should be able to go back filming maybe within the next month, and but it'll be things like lunches will be very different. Will we be able to sit around a table? We won't. We'll all have to bring a lunch. Do we all have to go to our cars and eat there? So the times when you're just having a little bit of downtime with your colleagues and you're chatting to them, they might be gone. I don't know. We won't really know until we start doing things.
True. That's so true. And do you find working from home has been a big adjustment for you, or are you more productive?
I suppose in the nature of what I do, I tend to spend a lot of time on the road. I tend to spend a lot of time traveling. And I can kind of generally work anywhere. I can open up a laptop or take out a sketch roll. I've worked in hotel rooms. I've worked in the back of a van. I've worked on airplanes. I've worked at the side of the road. I've just pulled up at the side of the road and finished off a sketch, taken a photograph of it, scanned it, emailed it. I'm one of these people who I probably spend more time designing and drawing and doing what I do on the road than I do in the office. And that's so the adjustment was fine. I was quite happy sitting at the kitchen table with the mayhem going on around me. I'm really good at zoning out and just focusing in on what's in front of me. And there could be all hell breaking loose around me, and punches and blood and teeth flying everywhere with kids and hair. And I'm really good at ignoring it, which then what I realized is then my wife started getting really annoyed at me because I was able to ignore what was going on. So I've moved into the front room now. So I've set up in there. But for me, I normally can work anywhere, and that's something I've been doing for the last 10 years. I just pull up somewhere. I was at the kitchen table. I was always kind of sketching at nighttime, doing stuff at the kitchen table, and I never needed a home office. Like we've designed a room upstairs in our house that is to be a home office and a den, but the kids have kind of taken over that, and it didn't bother me. I never thought, okay, that's my room, I want to go up there. I'm happy enough at the kitchen table, just at drawing and being kind of in the center of family life when I do that. So it never bothered me.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I know that you've been very busy with your Simon Community Project.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, so it's in its 16th year now, and I have been the ambassador for, I think it's 10 years. I can't even remember. I'm trying to think when was the first photo you did and what are the age of the kids. That's how I kind of have to think back. But yeah, it's a brilliant initiative. So like the Simon community are struggling for funds year on year, and it's a great way to raise money for the Simon community. They're really struggling this year because of COVID-19. They're doing everything that they do, but again, it's a bit like the construction industry. They have to social distance, so that means they might need 2 or 3 people there instead of having one person there because they have to space people out. But I suppose the initiative was founded by the RAI, and it was to kind of connect architects with the homelessness problem, because we look, obviously we design housing, we design spaces that people live in, and we're kind of always at the center of kind of trying to resolve this crisis. So it was a good kind of marriage between the two, and then I think what it was connecting local architects up and down the country with local people. And a lot of people were very intimidated about going to design professionals and to architects. They kind of think that's for TV shows, it's for grand designs, it's not for me, it's for other people. And for the small donation that you're making to the design community, it gave you an hour with an architect who wasn't going to judge you, wasn't going to think, oh, this project is too small for me, or this guy or this family aren't organized enough, or they don't have a brief. It was a really relaxed, easy way for people to meet their local architect and to just offload and ask any question. So when you're paying a small sum of money, you don't mind going in and saying, look, listen, I can't seem to get the storage right in my house. I'd love to, and architects do that. We're qualified to think of everything to do with a house, from designing a house to designing urban squares to designing airports, right down to door handles, storage, the whole lot. And so it was a really kind of clever idea, in where people were donating money to a charity, but I think they were getting a bargain in getting the advice of an architect for an hour, and it was a win-win.
Yeah, great. Gosh, that's a great thing to be a part of, actually.
It's brilliant, and I love doing it. And because even when you're out, I suppose my role in this is to get the message out there, is to do the radio interviews, to do the TV interviews, to do the press interviews. But actually, it's a really nice thing to talk about, because it is something that really, really tangible and useful that people are getting. So there's always an interesting conversation around it. And so, can I just, like, people will, in your interview, they say, can I just ask about colors from my presses? Yeah, you can. Can I ask about this? Yes, you can. Do you think I could get an idea of how to design a house? Yes, you can. So it creates an interesting conversation, and it's making architecture and design more accessible, because we had a huge problem with that in Ireland when I was growing up. People weren't exposed to design, and it was really seen as elitist, and it was seen for other people. Whereas now I think it's far more accessible, and TV programs have done that, and the likes of this initiative from the RAI have done that as well. It's just bringing design into everybody's lives every day, so that they're thinking, there is a choice. There's a couple of ways of doing this, and it's not just what everybody else. It's not. We live in cookie cutter houses. A lot of people, they live in 3-bed semis, 4-bed semis. They live in bungalows. Mm-hmm. We tend to live in the same houses, all of us, but architecture and design is about offering other solutions that kind of suit your life.
That's so true. So I'd love to start chatting with you about your first memories of your childhood home, Dermot. Can you share some of that with me?
Yeah, I grew up like probably 90% of the population in Ireland. I grew up in a 4-bed semi in Malahide, in County Dublin, out by the sea. So we had a small garden to the front. We were lucky; we were a corner house, as they were called back then. So we had a bit of a side garden, and we had a back garden. But it was a very kind of average, normal house. You walked in the front door. There was the good sitting room and the good dining room behind that. They were connected, and we never used those rooms. We were never allowed into them. And then we had the kitchen at the back of the house, which was a smallish, narrow room. And if we all sat at the kitchen table, if somebody wanted to put something into the dishwasher, 5 of us had to stand up, and the whole table had to be moved in. My mum was, because it was a new house when they moved into it, my mum was an incredibly shy person. And she wanted my dad to build a shed outside the back window so people couldn't look in at her, because it took 10 years for the planting to grow up around the house to give them the privacy that she wanted. So we sat, and it was very typical. It's these little things that I always remember that now are the things that I hate. But sitting at the kitchen table, and if you always, the kitchen sink went at the window, and because of that, your kitchen window was always a little bit higher than other windows, because it needed to incorporate a splashback. You had to have a splashback, because you couldn't have the window board coming in at counter level. You always had to have 150 millimeters above that for your splashback. So when you were sitting at the kitchen table, all you ever saw was the top of the sky over the shed, because we couldn't see out the window. And we spent most of our lives around that kitchen table. So I loved it. because it was my family, it was family time, and the kitchen table was where we spent most of our lives chatting. And I came from a family of kind of big chatters, and it would, my dad had a very sarcastic sense of humor, and we used to have great fun. But it was always around that table and sitting in amongst the pots and the pans and the debris of making the dinner. It was, and they were constantly around, so it was never sitting in a glorious kind of location. So you were sitting almost in this windowless room, that because it was at the back of the house, it got evening light. So if you were sitting down for lunch, there was no light coming into the house. But it was home, and we didn't know any better. I suppose the advantages of it was a brand new house in a new housing estate, and so all the kids around us were the exact same age, and everybody, the demographic were all nearly the same age. That everybody, all the couples bought the houses at the same time, and then would have started having families. So there was a great buzz when we were children growing up. We had a green across the road, and there's lots of neighbours, lots of kids. Again, it was brilliant at the time, but now I see it. It's there's one or two kids around because everybody, again, my mum is there by herself. My dad passed away 13 years ago, so mum is there. And it's the demographic, that's the problem with building kind of, I think is housing estates for just one for just families, and there's no older people, there's no younger people. You're just getting this one kind of demographic living in a big cluster, and then as kids kind of grow up and move on, then you're left with empty spaces outside. There's no kids playing outside, so that will start to change as the houses change hands. But it's, if you think about it, the life cycle is 50 years, and then it seems a bit long.
And what was your own bedroom like? Tell me about your teenage bedroom.
My teenage bedroom, it depends. I was kind of moved around because I was studying architecture, and it's even before that, my brother, my teenage bedroom, what was it? I was allowed into the guest room. We had a guest room, Eve, and I was allowed in there when I was finished my what the equivalent to the junior cert was called the intercert back then, and I was allowed into that, but I wasn't allowed to change anything. So it had this kind of Laura Ashley blue wallpaper on the walls, and this blue carpet. And I remember, this I don't think I've ever told anybody this, but I think when I was too young to be going to pubs, I think I did have a couple of cans one night, and with friends, and I felt really ill, but I couldn't tell anybody about it, and I vomited on the carpet. And at the end of my bed, and I had to and I was a little bit inebriated, and I just kind of left it there, and anyway, it soaked into the carpet, and the stains never came out. I don't know what I was drinking.
Lovely.
Yeah. So I then spent the next year moving the bed around so my parents wouldn't see the stain on the carpet. And that was my, and they used to come in, will you not move the bed back to where it was? I said, no, I like it like this. And but I wasn't really allowed to change anything. Every time I suggested kind of doing anything with the room, or can I paint the walls, I was told no. So it wasn't really kind of until I got my own house that I was allowed to do things to it. But
are you allergic to the color light blue now as a result of that? Have you been traumatized by that color?
Not my favorite color. I've never really painted anywhere in blue. I've never used blue. Yeah, maybe you're right. There's something in that. It's like I wear blue all the time, so it's my favorite color to wear. And but I find sometimes blues can be really difficult in a house. I think it has to be the right color blue.
Exactly.
Blues can be very cold, and they can very light blues can be. It's very hard to get a warm blue. You can get them, but I kind of tend to steer clear. Green is my go-to color.
Yeah. It's a good color too, actually. I like blue, and you can work with it. It just kind of depends on what part of the house you're in, really, and the tone and all those things, really.
Yeah. And you can do it, but it takes a little bit more confidence. And I suppose us architects we're very comfortable with white. So breaking away into color is a difficult thing to do. So I often feel then that so then steer clear of the blues because they're just too dangerous.
Yeah, it is. It's a whole different chapter, really, kind of what colors to use. But when did your passion for architecture begin then? At what point did you decide, I want to do this?
Do you know something? I don't remember ever wanting to be anything else. And I think I suppose I grew up in the semi-D in Malahide, which was in Dublin, but both my grandparents lived in the country. One lived in a small country cottage. Well, it was a small house, but it was a single-story house, and she ran a little shop from the house. And then my other granny lived in a farm. But so I kind of spent half my time living in rural Ireland, going down to my granny's house during the summer because my mum was a teacher. So as soon as kind of school was out, we headed down to the country, and we spent our summers down there, and the freedom but I adored country villages and how you could make kind of these urban qualities and almost have a little mini city just on a road going through the regular countryside. And it was this tightening up of the buildings and kind of houses above shops. And I was fascinated by that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was about 8, my dad was a horticulturalist, and we moved to Cairo. So I kind of went this, I went from this kind of living in suburbia, which was Malahide at the time, and spending summers in the countryside to go into this huge big metropolis of Cairo. And I'll never forget the first night that I landed there. And we were kind of driving to where we were living and seeing people out on the streets. Everything happened on the streets. They were cooking food on the streets. Women were nursing kids on the side of the footpath. The shops and stalls. I'd never seen anything like that in Dublin. We're set up everywhere. And it was this whole life. We lived on the 8th floor of an apartment block for the first few weeks when we arrived there. And I'd never even been in a building with 8 floors. And I didn't like lifts. I was scared of lifts. So that was horrendous because one of my parents had to walk up and down the stairs with me every time we wanted to leave the apartment. And 8 floors is a long way when you're tired. I'm over the phobia of lifts now, but at the time it was horrendous. But I remember just this kind of heaving city and the metros with people hanging out the back. People like sitting on the roofs of trains, and the place was absolute chaos. There was this fascinating place called the City of the Dead. So the very, very wealthy used to build these tombs and these mausoleums to themselves, and that's where they'd bury family members. But what happened was that the very, very poor then started to move in. So they'd move into the mausoleums and so they were basically living in people's graves. And I remember we lived in it was an apartment, but the apartments were kind of, you had the whole ground floor and then somebody else lived on the entire first floor. But in between two buildings, there was a family living in boxes, and we just got to know them as kids. We got to kind of, we were out playing with them, playing football or just running around. And I think it was just that exposure at a young age. I was always fascinated by how people lived. I was always fascinated by how they used buildings. I was fascinated by just watching people and how their buildings and their environments and how that kind of shaped life. So I think from a very early age, it was kind of just an obsession with how people live and their homes and public spaces, and even just like the steps up into a building when people kind of start to inhabit it, or markets. And it was the kind of, and village squares, but it was small, from the villages of Wexford and Waterford, where my mum and dad were from, to Malahide, which was kind of a small village at the time, to Cairo, and just it was this obsession with watching people and how they live. And I think that's and it was, for me, it's always been about people and inhabiting and how they inhabit and how they go about their daily lives. I have this obsession with how people live and how they, they execute everything that they do. And I think that's it. I always wanted to design spaces around that, and kind of I like, a lot of people think architects just want to design the one glory building. I'm interested in doing that. Like I'm just as fascinated by the in-between spaces. I love streets. I love I love when you go to New York and you go to Brooklyn and you see all the brownstones and you get the steps and you get the streets. I love walking around Manhattan because it's the skyscrapers and what kind of it's an energizing place. I remember when we filmed Incredible Homes in New York, we, on the very, very last day, they gave us a day off. And I just started wandering around the Upper East Side. I wanted to go up to the Guggenheim Museum and I wanted to do all that. And we all met up later on that evening, and somebody said, I'm after walking 20 kilometers. I think, wow, geez, you did a huge amount. And then I looked at my phone and I'd walked 25 kilometers. But because I was in the city, I didn't even notice it. And then, I love going to Barcelona, where you get, again, a different street life. You go to Italy, and streets narrow and then they widen out into these magnificent squares as people.
Yeah, true.
So I'm actually as obsessed with the in-between spaces and how buildings talk to each other and the outside spaces as much as I am as the inside. And I think it's become really apparent as well in COVID-19 as all of our buildings have shut down and we're now left with just the in-between spaces. And I think it's starting to show where it's really successful, where spaces that just don't feel any different, like Merrion Square and Fitzwilliam Square and some of the streets, and then other places that aren't, like that when people are forced to go for a walk on a bypass as opposed to, down a nice street. So I think for me, that's always been the obsession was kind of how people live and how they interact with buildings. And I'm just as obsessed with the streets and urban spaces and squares. Like I love Dublin and I love kind of South William Street and all that quarter, where it's happened in a very organic way, where people spill out the streets and shops. I just love wandering around these places and not necessarily going into shops or into buildings, but just being in those spaces. And I love doing that no matter where you are. I love when you arrive into a city and you try and get your bearings and kind of understand how people live in the cities. But I think you get far more of a sense of how people live in a city from what they do outside than what they do in a building.
That's very true. And that definitely influences them as well.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah. So do you ever feel a little bit of envy, like when you go to places like Italy or Barcelona and you wonder about who the architects were way back when designing those areas and what their thought process was? And do you ever envy that and think, God, I wish I had been a part of that?
I think we all have to be a part of our own time. And I think, back then, the Italian cities are so wonderful because they were actually just designed to give shade. The streets are so narrow, that the streets were so narrow to give shade. So they couldn't put in wide streets. So you'd have the sun beating into every apartment. And when the heat gets really hot in the Mediterranean countries, it is all about shade. And the squares and where people gather, a lot of them are around churches. So it was very much about designing spaces so that people could spill out of churches and then maybe have a bit of lunch or something like that, or collect together. I think we have a big challenge, I think, in Ireland now, as we need a huge amount of houses, and housing is such a big crisis, is how we do it. And how do we start to kind of house people now in meaningful places, like we used to 100 years ago? Like I'm just as fascinated by the Irish village, and you go to small little villages like Inistioge, or you go to small towns like Fermoy and places like that, where they've got these grand market squares, and they've got 3 or 4 story high Georgian buildings around them. And I'm just as fascinated with those, and I think we've got huge opportunities in Ireland to look at our towns and villages around the country. And now that people are kind of realizing, maybe I could work from home, I could move back down to kind of to Tullamore or to all of these places. It's what we do with these spaces, and instead of kind of just building housing in a way that it's okay, well, we build 3-bed semis, 4-bed semis, we build a road, we build a green around it. We're offering the same solutions over and over again, but actually we're not really knitting them back into the glorious towns and villages that we have in Ireland. Like if you go up to Westport, or Clonakilty, like Westport is one of my favorite towns in this country, but it's been planned for the last 20 years, and it's a friend of mine, Simon Wall, a guy I went to college with, and he became the town architect, and he drew up a plan 20 years ago to slowly get rid of car parking spaces from the streets, move behind the buildings, and start to give street light. Westport is now bustling on a Tuesday morning, and where some Irish towns are struggling. And the reason is that they've buildings and the spaces in between buildings make a difference, and they make a difference to a town and how people live and how people interact with each other. And I think you've got to give them those spaces, and so much has been given over to the car in Ireland, and so much has been given over to like these amazing squares in villages have just suddenly become big seas of car parking. Whereas I think if we can start to look at what are the amazing, glorious things that we have in Irish villages, and maybe look at how are they designed, what were they invented for, and could we move back to that a little bit? And I think I'm hoping that's what will happen.
Yeah, I loved watching your Incredible Homes program, where you traveled to like Australia, America, Sweden. I mean, what was that all like for you?
Oh, that was the busman's holiday. It was brilliant. It was they came to me with RTE said, look, we have a couple of slots in the winter. I can't remember when the first episodes went out. And they said, what would you like to do? And at the time, like Room to Improve is such a labor heavy a TV program to make. I said, look, I can't do any more Room to Improve. I'll be dead. So they said, well, what would you like to do? And I said, well, look, I love traveling and I love exploring cities and I love kind of getting to understand what makes a city the way it is. So I'd love to travel. And so they said, okay, well, let's start with New York and we'll do Los Angeles. Even though they're in America and people just associate and America as kind of one country, they couldn't be more different in everything, in the way that, you know, as two cities. So we did New York and we did Los Angeles first, and then we did Melbourne, Sydney. Actually, one of my favorites was Stockholm. We did Stockholm, Gothenburg, and up in the north. But you know, Sweden was an amazing place because the culture and light and conditions and geography and the climate were so different. It was amazing. We've just come back from Canada, which we did some houses in Toronto, and then we went over to Halifax and out to a little village called Lunenburg, it was just stunning.
Wow.
Yeah, so everything kind of got put on hold after that due to the lockdown, but hopefully we'll get back to that someday. I don't know when, but it is like it. I always remember when I was in college, I said to somebody, what's the best thing to do? How do you get the best results? And they said, travel, see, feel, experience. Every time there's a trip going from college, get on that bus and go. And I did. And I went on practically every trip. We went to Italy, Switzerland, France, Spain. Now, because they were college trips, there was no flying here, there and everywhere. You were put on into the back of a transit van and you got the boat and you traveled all over Europe. But I loved it. And, you know, arriving in Ronchamp by Corbusier at 4:00 in the evening at dusk was just one of the most magical things. Walking around Luigi Snozzi's, who's one of my big heroes, buildings in southern Switzerland, and all these were on one trip. We arrived one evening in Verona, and we had 4 hours just to go to see Castelvecchio by Carlo Scarpa, and then back on the bus. It was just worth the bing of architecture was brilliant. And I remember one of the I think I'm giving away too much about my drinking habits, but we had one big night out when we were in I can't remember, somewhere near Venice. And with the next morning, in order to go to see the Brion Cemetery, which is the very famous one by Carlo Scarpa, it's the one you see all the images of the two circles, interlocking circles. And we had to go there at 5. I think I went to bed at 4:30, and a half an hour later they were knocking on the dormitory door and they were saying, right, we're leaving. And I said, oh God, I don't want to miss this, but I don't think I can do it. I remember getting onto the bus feeling really ill and tired, and by the time, but when I got there, there was something incredible about it. There was something energizing about it.
Yeah.
It was like it just kind of cleared it all. And so that's for me, visiting things, experiencing them, walking into them, standing in them, feeling them. There's nothing like that. And it's the same, like when you go to Venice and you stand in St. Mark's Square,
it's incredible.
Yeah, you can look at photographs and you think it's really nice, but I think with architecture and buildings, for me, you have to feel them.
Sure, it's so impressive. It really is.
Yeah, but so is Venice, and the canals and the water and the light and the everything that you're kind of doing with that. It's a completely different environment that you can look at photographs of it and you can see it in magazines, but it's not the same as experiencing it.
I know, and the level of planning and thought that went behind it all, it's just, that's a whole another chapter, really. It's incredible. In all of your travels, which architect has inspired you the most?
Ooh, which architect? Let me see. I think probably Frank Lloyd Wright. Maybe the Guggenheim Museum in New York is really, really hard to beat, I think. But I think when I went to Australia, there was something amazing about the buildings there because they don't have the history and culture that we might have in Europe because, as a country, they're only 100, 150 years old. Yeah. So they don't have to knit in with a streetscape. They don't have to there's no rules that they need to adhere to. And don't get me wrong, I love the rules and kind of trying to make a street work and being an infill site. But with that, there was some incredible conceptual designs where it was, they had an idea. So for one of the houses we went to see was the compound house and was owned by a steel worker. So they got these ribbons of steel and they kind of almost formed like a nest, first floor, all made out of this ribbon of steel. And then the ground floor was these really heavy steel trusses that you are more likely to see in an airport than you are in a house, holding very, very lightweight structure. So they kind of came up with this idea of a compound house, and that probably you couldn't do here if you're doing it in an urban environment. It wouldn't fit in, but it worked really well in Melbourne, and I just was fascinated by that. And I think there was an incredible creativity there in trying to kind of find an idea and then and bring that idea right through to the last detail of the house. It was amazing to see.
Yeah,
it's one of the, and again, it was. I don't know if you remember on the TV episodes we went to. What was the name of the house? I can't remember the name, but it was a white box that had a ramp going up through the whole house, and it was all designed around a sand and the angle of a sand dune. And I just found that fascinating. I don't know if I could live in the house. I don't know if I could, but I certainly would love to spend a weekend there. But I just thought it was fascinating how, people could take an idea and then work it through. And they loved it. And the two guys who lived in the house absolutely loved it and the experience of it. But it was these conceptual houses that kind of test and stretch your own imagination and kind of want to, I think every time you experience something or you read or you travel, it makes you a better architect. Like whenever I start into any project, I spend 2 or 3 days just reading. I spend 2 or 3 days gathering images of projects that have been done very similar to it. This is nothing to do with presenting to the client at all. This is just for me. I need to do my research. I need to kind of start into a project and kind of get my touch points of nobody reinvented the wheel. So there's always somebody who's tried to or has attempted to solve the problem that you're solving. So search them out and kind of look at how other people have done it. So for me, that's the joy in architecture. And I love those days, the initial days of designing a building where you kind of immerse yourself into it and you immerse yourself into the lives of the people who are going to live in the house. That's one thing I do from the very outset. I spend a lot of time chatting to my clients, and sometimes they think, geez, he's an awful chatterbox, but what I'm actually trying to do is to paint a picture of their lives. So I know on a Saturday morning what their house is going to be like. I know on a Friday evening what it's going to be like. I know on a Tuesday afternoon what the house is going to be like. So when I'm designing the house, I become them. It's almost like being a method actor.
right.
I become my clients in my head, and I'm thinking, oh no, they're going to hate that, even though I might like it. And I think no, but that just won't work for them because the smells from the kitchen will be too much, or there's going to be too many sports bags all gathered there on a Tuesday afternoon. So that space is going to need to be wider. So I inhabit that, and then you look for your inspirations, and you can spend 2 hours just kind of searching through buildings on the internet, and I love losing myself into that, and you come out of it inspired. Even sometimes you mightn't have found anything that has the same or similar, but it tends to kind of just get the creative juices flowing, and then I kind of sketch something and I walk away from it. I always kind of try and finish up something in the evening time, but that's not resolved. And you can be guaranteed you go back to it the first thing in the morning and it works itself out, because it's sometimes sleeping on it or going for a walk or going on to something different and going back to it. It's a bit like doing a Sudoku problem. You can look at it for ages and then you leave it down and then you go back to it later on in the day and it just kind of clicks into place.
Yeah, it then comes to you. Do you find that managing your clients' expectations is tricky? Because often in the process, what you think it might be at the beginning can be something completely different at the end.
Yeah, I suppose it depends what their expectations are. I think a lot of their expectations, they have a certain budget and then they have a big long wish list, and it's all about getting that wish list into the budget. So yeah, early on, I suppose what we try and do is put figures onto projects as quick as we possibly can, so people, they don't get too invested in it. So sometimes they can fall in love with this huge big grand house that you've designed for them, and then they realize, oh God, I can't afford it. But you're kind of design, so you're always kind of walking a line between what their budget is and what they tell you they can afford, and their wish list, because for them especially when it comes to a house, most people only design a house once in their life, and they want it to encompass absolutely everything. They don't want to make compromises. They don't want to kind of forget about doing that bit. But I suppose the harsh reality is when you start putting figures and you think, well, are you prepared to stump up more money for it? Or do you want me to start getting rid of rooms? But when there are other expectations, what I try and hope with the design of it, and is that I go beyond their expectations, because clients always come into me and they say, look, I know exactly what I want. I've been looking at Pinterest. I've been looking at Instagram. I've collected all of the pages, and I know exactly how I want it to be. I've been thinking about this for 2 years. And you think, well, no, it's not that you know what you want, it's you want what you already know. And I think that, it's when people come to me, and they say, oh, look, I've done up a plan myself, or we've got this done here, or I've got this. And they get really annoyed at me at the beginning, because I say, I kind of almost put that to the bottom of the pile, or I put it under the file. And they say, well, do you not want to look at what my ideas are? And they're, well, why are you coming to me? Why are you paying me? Why are you sitting here if you want me just to regurgitate your ideas? Or do you want me to validate and say, yeah, yours are great? I can do that, no bother. There you go. But you're coming to me to throw fresh eyes onto it. I'm coming 20 years experience in the workplace and 6 years in college. So allow me just to put my own stamp on it first, or to interpret your needs and the site and all of those concerns. Let me interpret that and see what you think of it. And then we'll go back and we'll look at your design. And it's funny how you kind of, lots of people get caught up with, oh, well, a sitting room needs to look like this, or a house needs to be symmetrical on the front. And it's all of these preconceived ideas that they have that are built in from a very, very young age of what a house should be. And what I try and do is just turn them upside down for them. And that can be a difficult journey for them, because you're asking them then to start with a sketch that's completely the opposite to what they thought they were going to do. They know that it's right, but they're really fearful of it, and they have to trust it. So that's the hardest part, is getting people to go on the journey with you, and to leave behind their preconceived ideas of what a house or a building should be, and allow me just to. It's always it gets caught up always with the ego. They think that I'm doing this, I want to get my own way, or I want this to be
I know,
for me. But I'm never doing it for me. I'm always doing it for them, because when I'm designing it in my own head, I am them. And then at the end of the project, they'll turn around and say, God, it just really suits our lives, and it's we love it, and it's great. And there's nothing like that. There's nothing like that feeling. And they say, God, he did listen to us somewhere, and I said, I've been listening to you from day one, and it's just you didn't trust me that I was. You didn't trust that I was listening to you, that I was understanding what you wanted. I was, and now you can see. But you had never seen this solution before, and you were very nervous of it. And it's kind of getting people over the line with that.
Yeah, it's really important to challenge people. That's so, so true. What do you think your strength is, Dermot?
I think you have to challenge them. It's a bit like
Yeah.
It's not because you have to challenge them for them. But if you think about it, like, it's a profession. My job, everything I do every single day is about designing buildings. If I was a doctor and I went into a patient in a room, I'd never ask them, what do you think I should do? And as if I was lying in a hospital bed and the doctor came in to me and said, okay, so I'm going to operate on the knee now. Are you okay with that? Or would you like to do something different? I'd run out of the hospital. So I think it is I think in Ireland, it's back to kind of what we spoke about earlier, is in Ireland, there hasn't been a design culture. So people always just got a builder in, or they built an extension the same as next door, or they did what their mother did, or their father did, or they built and we did that for years. So it's kind of showing them that, okay, look, they're architects do a job. We're here for a reason, and we understand it. We understand your brief. We understand you guys. So just letting us do it. And always when you tell the story about the doctor, people laugh, and they all say the same thing. Or it's like when you do your end of year accounts, you don't go to your accountant and say, like, can you do that? They tell you what to do. It is a profession.
Yeah.
It's kind of just getting people to trust that. But I think that's changing in Ireland, and I think people are now starting to trust design professionals and see their value, and see what you can bring to a building. Because you would hope, like, I think there was this thing in Ireland that you buy a house and then you'll always extend it, you'll always do this to it, or we change it up every 4 or 5 years, and we throw out everything, we start from scratch, whatever's in fashion. And I'd hope that people now will will kind of design a building and hopefully never extend it, and hopefully never do any other work to it, and let it slowly evolve with you because you've designed it right and thought about it from the first place. There's nothing kind of annoys me more than when you're doing an event and people kind of come up to you afterwards and they show you their plans, and they've designed a building and it's floating in the middle of a white page, and you say to them, "Where's the views?" And they're there, "Oh, I never thought of that."
Yeah, I know.
And then they're saying, and then they say, and I say, "Well, where does the light come in? Which way is north?" "Oh, I don't know." And they're prepared to spend 400,000 or 500,000 euros building this huge big house, and yet they don't know where north is. They don't know where this light is coming in from. They never thought about the views. They're just building a house that somebody else has built. It's just a copy and paste of somebody else's house, and because somebody else is happy in their home, they think, "Well, sure, I'll be happy here." But they don't realize there's more you can do, and buildings can be better, and they can be far more responsive to their sites, and they can be magical places. Like some of the most magical buildings I've been in, they're not big, they're not ostentatious, but they'll capture a view, or they'll have this amazing light streaming into it, or they'll control the amazing light streaming into it, or there'll be just a lovely connection or a flow between spaces. And that's design. That's what design is. It's not about pictures, it's not about the end result, it's not about the final layer that goes onto it, it's about kind of how you use the space, how you sit in it, how you enjoy the space, where the light is, what's your view out. And every house has got something good, every house has got something to kind of connect to, every house, every building has got a view, has got something beyond where it is that you need to start to reach out and connect to.
Very true. That's so true. And Dermot, I'd love to ask you about your own home.
Yeah.
Did you find it, you find it no doubt very easy to make decisions for other people, but how did you find that whole process when you were making decisions for yourself?
An absolute nightmare. I hated it. I just wanted it to be over. It was horrendous. There's a friend of mine, Declan O'Donnell is his name, and he was doing a house exactly the same time as me. And his is just finished as well. Now he was having a baby in the middle of it, but I remember we used to just talk to each other and moan and kind of saying, "This is really hard, isn't it? This is really difficult." It was kind of like a therapy group, but I just found the whole process a little bit overwhelming, because I suppose for years I had kind of built up, and I became everything that I kind of gave out about in my own clients, and saying, "Look, throw away the scrapbooks, throw away this, the house will inform itself. You don't need to have I was collecting stuff in my own head, and I was, some of the architects who I really, really admired, this guy called Vincent Van Diesen in Belgium, and I love his work, and I think he's a really clever way of kind of making buildings that connect to their outside, to nature, but also he brings it right through to the final details, down to kitchens and flooring. So I kind of had this palette in my head, but actually as the house evolved, everything went on its head, and all of the decisions that I'd kind of pre-made in my own head all changed, every single one of them. But now it has made the house better. But that was an incredibly difficult process for me to go through, because I didn't have somebody standing behind me just saying, "Just do it, trust me, just do it." I had to be that person. And so that was really difficult. Whereas I often feel jealous of my clients, because I'm making the decision for you guys. I could walk away and I'll just tell the builder to do it and it'll be fine and you're going to love it. But the thing is, we're having this chat, but really I'm just asking you, trust me and do it. I had nobody to stand over me and force me and say, "You're doing it and that's it, and I don't care, just do it, please do it." And with that, then I had to do that to myself. And the palette of materials that I was using, that all changed. But it kind of, for me, great buildings and are kind of stuff. They start with the views, they start with light, and then they start with the materials that are around you. And we started with a kind of caramel colored art deco, or no, sorry, a caramel colored arts and crafts building that had black kind of timber detailing. So that informed the windows, which were black, and which then I wanted them to disappear in the back of the house. So then that was the first color to be introduced in the house, was black. And then the garden actually informed a lot of the house, because I wanted to recreate an arts and crafts kind of type palette of material for the gardens, and that's not kind of a very, very bright granite. It's limestones and darker colors. That then informed the terrazzo, which I always thought was going to be a white terrazzo, and that ended up being a kind of chocolatey brown with mother of pearl. Then I thought I would use kind of a pale oak, because I love that kind of that washed out, slightly limed pale oak, and that Vincent Van Diesen uses. But that, when I put that into the middle of the terrazzo, it looked horrendous. So it became a dark smoked oak, which is not something I wanted to do. But then that natural, but the house has kind of grown from all of the influences that are around it. But that was the process that I needed to go through. And now it sits really comfortably on the site. And when you see the materials, they all work very, very well together, and they work well with the outside. There's nothing jar, but it's the complete opposite to what I had started out with. And I think that it was kind of forcing myself to question it when you'd already made up your mind about something and thought, this is what I'm going to do, but actually saying, no, question this. And actually, when it started to feel a little bit uncomfortable in your stomach and saying, okay, yeah, there is something wrong with what's already in my head. Yeah. And then forcing yourself to let that go, with nobody telling you to let it go, and nobody telling you it's the wrong thing. I found that process really, really hard. But now that it's finished, it's kind of, everything makes sense. Nothing, I don't look at anything and think, wow, that's really amazing, but it all just slots together and makes sense and feels like it belongs. And that's what I was ultimately trying to kind of achieve.
Excellent. And where is your favorite place in your home?
Ooh, where's my favorite place in my home? There's one little spot, and it's at the kitchen island, because the kitchen is in the middle of the house, and you look upstairs into the mezzanine, so you get this lovely double height space. But actually, it's the best view out into the garden, because you get this lovely view back out to the house. The house is kind of Peter Stud, or what do you call it? Not Peter Stud, an architect that worked on a house in Australia. He had this idea that a house is either a tent or a cave. It's one or the other. So it's either really, really open to the outside, or it's very, very enclosing, like the Georgian buildings and all that. And actually, so the upstairs of the house is very solid. It's a big, heavy mass with smaller windows, and that's very kind of cave-like. And they're the bedrooms, and they're the rooms. Downstairs is just, it's the floor is a continuation right out into the garden, and then it steps up to the level. So it's from that space you get to see the whole way through, up to the steps in the garden, up to the higher level, up into the volume upstairs, and you really kind of experience the weight of the first floor, which is this very, very heavy volume sitting on top of this. So it's the kind of the tent. That's my favorite spot in the house.
Wow. And how do you relax in the evenings?
How do I relax in the evenings? 3 kids.
I know, it's just all go. You seem really super duper busy, and I've always wondered, how do you unplug?
I sea swim, and I love sea swimming, and the kids now love it. So we all head out and we just jump off a pier and we go swimming for half an hour. Walks. The seafront in Clontarf isn't far from me, so I love doing that. And then down the wooden bridge down to Dollymount Strand, and that's the really, and it's that, and I actually love a good thriller on either in a book or pure escapism. And box sets on Netflix. But it's cooking. I enjoy cooking, and for me, the kitchen was actually always the most important part of the house. And it's right at the center of our house. It's in the middle. All of the rooms look into it. So you got the den upstairs, which is in the double height space, looks into the kitchen. There's a little kind of morning area which looks into the kitchen. The dining space is right beside the kitchen, and our main living space is around the corner. So you see back into the kitchen. So the kitchen is the heart of everything. If I had the time, I would spend all day cooking. I love it. I absolutely, and I've been it was kind of since lockdown and all of that, I've actually been cooking every weekend and spending a huge amount of time. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And I find it, I suppose it's creative and relaxing, and then you get something, and I especially love baking, because then you get cakes and all that at the end.
Really? Wow, I'm surprised.
Within my family, my mum is a home economics teacher, and so there was always cooking going on in our house. There was always, like, dinners were never kind of rustled up in 20 minutes when I was growing up. They were kind of a 4-hour event. Mum always seemed to be cooking. There always seemed to be, there was smells of cooking. There was always
delicious.
Yeah, so that's and I suppose for me that's always been in my it's been in my DNA. My brother's a chef, and so cooking is another creative outlet that I love. But like, really, it's the same as everybody else, hanging out with the kids, kind of bringing when all of this lifts. I can't wait to just start bringing them back to their matches on a Saturday morning and hanging out with them. But it's just very regular. And if just for a bit of headspace, it's the sea swim and the walks and cooking. They're the hobbies. I know I need to get a proper hobby, but I've never really had the time. And architecture and design, like that, a lot of the books that are beside the bed, if they're not thrillers, are design books.
Yeah, that's your hobby as well. It's everything. Yeah,
I'm really lucky, I suppose, the fact that I get to do what I love every single day. So it's never felt like a job.
That's so true. And this is my final question for you, Dermot. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh. What advice would I give to my younger self? I think, especially in the industry where in architecture, I remember when I started off in my career, I was very unsure of myself. I was very unconfident. And I always felt that when you went into a big office environment, that you needed to prove yourself and you needed to kind of almost put up this kind of wear this suit of armor of knowledge. And, kind of saying when your boss said something like, can you get this done? You go, yes, I can. And then you go, I don't even know what that means. And then you have to go and research it and find out about it and do it. I would have been a lot easier on myself, and I would have asked questions instead of being as kind of, I would have gone to people and said, I don't know how to do that. I wouldn't have always tried to kind of try and discover it myself. I would have been a little bit easier on myself. You can't know everything, and I think people are really happy to share knowledge and question it. And I've kind of, we're always learning. I still feel like the 18-year-old student, where every time I read a new article or read a new book or see a new building, I try, that goes in on you as if it was the first time you picked up a book about an architect when you were in college. So just allowing yourself that, and allowing yourself to be, it's okay not to know everything, and it's okay not to, you don't have to pretend that. So it just ask questions, and it's, I'm my own kids are incredibly inquisitive, and one of the proudest moments I ever had was when my daughter, when we went to a parent-teacher meeting, and she said she's not afraid to put up her hand and question everything. And I thought, that's brilliant, because she's not suffering with the same kind of things that I did. She's happy to keep asking the question until she gets it right, because I think sometimes we as a society feel that we need to know everything, or you look bad, or you look like a failure if you don't know everything. And you don't. It's okay to question things, and people are really delighted to answer the questions and explain it to you. And I've no problem now sitting in a meeting with 20 people and saying, excuse me if I'm thick, am I getting this right? Can you explain this to me? Because you can be then guaranteed that 10 other people around the table were dying to ask the same question, but just
Exactly. That's so true. And it's great that you're the eternal student. I mean, you can learn from everyone in your industry at any level. Even I find my own customers, I'm learning things from them as well, things that I would never have thought of before. So yeah, it's important to have an open mind.
It is, and people and experiences, and don't ever discount. You might see your paths might cross, and you think, God, they've led a very different life to me, or there's everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has. I think everybody's experienced things that you won't have experienced, and there's always something to learn from. And there's always people will always have incredible stories, even though sometimes you mightn't think they have. It's just you just need to dig a little bit. And yeah, that for me is the most fascinating part of life.
Just a separate thing, a few quick questions in a quick fire.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Bath or shower?
Ooh, a shower.
Socks or jocks?
For what?
To put on first.
Oh, to put on for jocks.
Text or talk?
Talk.
Cat or dog?
I'd love to say dog, but actually cat.
Okay, red or white wine?
Red.
Taxi or walk?
Walk.
Sea view or green view?
Sea.
Retro or modern?
Modern.
Urban or country?
Oh, that's a really difficult, because I love both. But if it was a choice that you could either live in one or the other, I would urban.
Home or abroad?
Home.
Site visits or office meetings?
Site visits.
Paper or digital?
Paper.
Modern or classic?
Modern.
Boris Johnson or Donald Trump?
No. If I had to choose one, well, Boris Johnson, lesser of two evils.
Well, Dermot, thank you so much for joining me today, and I've loved chatting with you.
We didn't get to colour schemes or anything. Sure we didn't.
No, that'll be part 2. That'll be another podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Take care and mind yourself.
Thanks, Arlene.